where you are, the railroad tracks are being taken up. I know where we live out in Salem, Indiana, in the country. All the railroad tracks in the country are being taken up. And it's not just in one area, it's in a lot of different areas that they are taking up the railroad tracks. And I thought, some people were saying, they're making paths for these railroad tracks, like walking paths. Hello, Applebrooks, honey. Walking paths or something like that. And it really looks strange. The railroad, the trains used to come down the railroad tracks. And that's part of our critical infrastructure. That's part of part of the transportation industry. And of course, you know what trains run on. I guess they're considered a pollutant, but still, if you notice in the big areas, the main transit areas, the trains still go down the tracks, and they fix those tracks up. If you've ever noticed, I know, like in Sellersburg, Indiana, years and years ago, they started, repairing the railroad tracks in Sellersburg, Indiana, and it goes across the bridge from Louisville, Kentucky, across the Indiana. I don't know where that bridge goes. The railroad tracks. Trains started back from the Louisville side, and we sat and watched it. It was like, seemed like it was 5 minutes. That train just kept going and going and going and going and going, and there didn't seem like there was an end to it, but we finally saw the end of that train track. So we know the train tracks are still in use in main metropolitan areas, main hubs, but when you start having the train tracks that used to run through the countries, and hello, and you're noticing they got these machines, and they're coming through and they're taking up all the tracks. And once they take all the tracks up, they lay them in big old piles. Let me flip this around. They lay them in big piles, and then these semis come, and these things with forklifts, I don't know what they are, they come and they pick up all the old metal from the tracks, and they put them on these trailers, and then these square things, whatever the square things, I think these square things that hold the tracks together or something, in the town of Salem, right next to the Goodwill, and in between, like, I guess this gas station, there's this open lot. And they have all these squares that have these rivets. I thought, what is that? Well, you got all these piles of like squares and rivets, because that's what it was. Riveted squares in big piles, heaps and heaps of piles. I thought, is that wood or something? And my friend said, no, Gina, that's metal. That's from the railroad tracks. She said, I guess they're like dropping them off there, and then they're going to come back and get them. And then one day we saw them with the hoist with the great big magnet, picking them up and stuff, or whatever it was, and they was putting them in these big old, I don't know what it was, trucks or something, but they're taking up the railroad tracks that go into the countryside. And I'm thinking, you want to make walking paths all throughout these areas of the countryside, or do you want to stop the goods from flowing into the country? Do you want to stop? I think your muffler on your motorcycle is a little bit too loud. Do you want to stop commerce, the flow of commerce, goods and services from like one county to the next, and only have one hub? Hello. Welcome everyone. Like a magnet, yeah. Where you're all at, are you noticing that, the railroad tracks that you had, and even when you were little, you know that if you live by railroad tracks, you could just walk down the railroad tracks, and you could follow them, and they're going to lead to the next town. They are. And then now with them picking them up, it's just gravel left behind, just gravel. You love the engines. You love, it's right, the magnet, you all. So why are they doing it? Is this, okay, now let's think about it. People travel on trains too, they do. And they have for years, trains and buses. But will there be another mode of like transportation? Y'all, this is like a stream right here. will there be another mode of transportation that they want people to travel on? Like if say a thing happened and people were driven underground and they got these underground things like Elon Musk's thing underground. What do you call that? Ground, the ancient. Remember that the old subways under the cities. Now let's think about this. They were once in full operation, and then they became a thing of the past. And then there's some tunnels that are under there. Um, there's some tunnels that are under there, and they look really ancient. So there had to be, at one time, a booming civilization underground in the tunnels. But if you think about the mud flood thing, and like the buildings that are covered in the mud, and I don't know, things melted and way underground, like you don't know much about that civilization. And then the history of the ones that were in the tunnels, people were in the tunnels back in old times, ancient times. And I guess maybe that was once the surface of the earth, you think? They're boxing up every day citizens into a specific area. Carol, honey, you've been seeing it? They're still in the dumps, the electric cars. Yes, the greatest ever, silent and dangerous, back in the horses and buggy days. And then, like, I think they're going to, Gina, you ain't got that turned to you. I think they're going to choke off that mode of transportation. They are really. And at this place that I used to work at in Jeffersonville, Indiana, it was like a World War, whatever the last World War thing is. They turned it into the women and stuff. They were sewing clothes for the military during one of these wars, and I can't remember what it was. But this area, it had these trains that came up to the buildings, and they had prisoners of war in them, and the train pulled barbed wire fences. And this one building where I was working in, they had the prisoners hand hew big beams. I mean, they were like 6 or 8. They were wide as these railroad tracks. With their hands, the prisoners built all the beams out of wood, put them up there, and they would build the tall buildings. You could see the historic architecture in the building. And I remember I used to like going through there. But sometimes at night when I worked my second shift job, hello, you could feel like presence in there because, there are a lot of prisoners like died in there too. And in this one area that I worked, it was a concrete floor. And they put the concrete together with like, I don't know, concrete mortar to join two pieces. There was a big crack that opened. And I remember taking out my flashlight and I wanted to see what was down there in that floor. And it went down probably around 6 or 7 feet, I think. It could have went down further. I wanted to see what was under there because I knew that was where they housed prisoners of war. And I don't know how they filled it up. I don't. But they could have buried people under there too. There's been people in these buildings that house the prisoners of war. They used to have the trains to come up. The train tracks are still there, but they're like kind of covered over. They never use them anymore. But the whole facility was like turned into wartime usage. And there were some co-workers that I worked with. They remember when they were little, they would stand outside the fence and say, "Mommy, Mommy, look at those people. Who are they?" And their mommy would tell them, well, they're prisoners of war. And they remember seeing them. These women, they were down in the 70s by then. But it's the failing. See, this is not failing infrastructure. This is built really good. This train track. And still, it's going to last a long time. It really is. I mean, it might rust, but it's not going to decompose like some of the other stuff will nowadays. It's not going to, because it was built to last. So why would you get rid of an infrastructure, a piece of critical infrastructure, transportation that would not last? I mean, that was built to last. Why you want to get rid of it and implement it? You sold townhouses after owning a 10 years and made nothing, even though you finished off the basement. You added a bathroom, many improvements, moved to a commerce, and bittersweet, how ironic. You sold your townhouse. Wow. The railroad tracks give you the creeps. You found a can of food on the store shelves that expired in 2018 when this first started. What you're talking about. Yeah, they were having the food shelves were getting empty. And there was those videos going around where the semi trucks going into the ground, into these great big tunnels that were slanted, made of concrete, and they went around like that. Let me see my hand like this. They went underground like that, and it was semi after semi after semi going under the ground. And there were some people who drove the semi and said, you know, it's taking all this food and we're storing it underground. And then after a while, like you said, you found that food now on the shelves. Now on the shelves, it's like perhaps maybe it was a deliberate withholding to create a food crisis. And then now you get the expired food that's not going to last as long, you all. It isn't. The old railroad tracks, if you're just tuning in, they're cutting this live chat because it got up to 150. And then viewing, when I looked at it a while ago, they brought it down to like 100. So they're still cutting the feed, you all. Still cutting it. You notice everything has a short expiration date. And you notice the crackers. You used to be able to, crackers, the saltine, they would last a long time. Now they go rancid. You can't keep them for a month. They're going to go rancid and they're going to smell. What do they smell like? Like chemical-like stuff is what they smell like. Okay, I'm looking at a shadow on the ground. Chemical, rancid smell. They don't want it to last. They don't. Everything, yeah, that's right, you all. If you're just tuning in, why are they taking up the railroad tracks? Because they're taking them all up along the countryside. And they're taking away the metal, and all that's left is like just a pathway with gravel. And they say it's a walking path. Yeah, it's walking paths. And you know what? They can find you if you had to flee the city. You know, you could cut through the countryside because there's so many hills and stuff, and people's got their own properties. If you're going to escape on the railroad track like that, well, they know they can see you. They can see you. They can see you trying to escape because they know where all those railroad tracks are. They're removing them to eliminate the means. That's right, Denise, of travel and movement. All about the 15-minute cities. If a bridge serves the purpose of crossing a body of water, then the person cannot freely travel, but is stuck in a specific area. That's right. This applies to trucks and cars and carrying food and uncontaminated water. The banking lawyer since the 20s, and you have nothing to show for it. Yeah. Only favors. Yeah, the recipe for the crackers, they kind of remind me of, what is, unleavened bread. When you have your communion, you know, you're supposed to have unleavened bread. My mother used to make it. And I think it would be kind of likened into the crackers, really. Yeah. They've been turning your walking trails since the early 2000s, so it's a long-term implementation. You saw men taking the metal from the train tracks to get money for them. They make steroids on a spaceship. Do they really? Um, yeah. I would get kind of closer to this thing. This right here has trout in it. Of course, I don't even know how you would catch any trout in a stream that is so shallow, unless she was doing fly catching, and that would be a skill in itself. Learn how to fly catch. Um, I mean, the bubbling brook sounds really nice. It does, you all. I'm just saying, it sounds really good, really nice. Hello, thank you for tuning in. So, what are they doing? Ow, with all the train tracks. Why are they taking them up? And if you look in the comment section, you'll find some answers. They're limiting the free, you're going to and fro and entering, and it's making it harder. I mean, you can't ride your bike that well on gravel either. You can't. Um, it's hard to walk on gravel, so you'd be slow getting out there if you're going to try to follow the railroad track path and it's gravel. It's going to be slow getting off of it. Um, Organic non-GMO cracker flavors. Oh, wow. Um, the people's skin color. Okay, now, Ashley, honey, that's a really good thing to ask or to notice. Have you all noticed people's skin color is changing? And if you're noticing people's skin color is changing, in what way is it changing? What way? Is it getting lighter? Is it getting darker? Is it getting a different type of a pigment? Is it shiny and scaly? Is anyone having dry skin like? Um, is anyone else? Yeah. Potted meat on soda crackers. I remember eating that all the time. I do. A lot. Potted meat and Vienna sausages. It's they're turning what? Your skin's turning gray? People's personalities has changed too, Sharon Rose. Someone would say, Gina, honey, your personality has really changed. Yeah. Um, your skin is very dry and scaly now. Anybody else has very dry and scaly skin? I know this is about the railroad tracks, them taking it up, but there's a great big master plan that seems to have been implemented, really. And yeah, what about your vision? Now, is anyone's eyes becoming even more sensitive to sunlight? Um, have you noticed an extreme sensitivity to the sunlight with your eyes? That you can't look at it anymore, and that if you see better when it starts to get dark outside? Yes. I think that is a growing thing that's happening.